Hey guys, this is Johnny from 3blog. I'm just responding to Bill Gaede's response to my video on psychology. So one of the mistakes I made in that video was I didn't really give a good example of physics. I kind of, I used the example of, the USSR taking over the Eastern Bloc, and in my head I was thinking of like, guns and ammunition and armies and objects that are moving around, not like the purposes like behind, like why like Joseph Stalin did X, Y, and Z, right? So I should have used a better example. So an example of physics would be how did Karl Marx write the Communist Manifesto, right? So maybe he used, pen on paper, typewriter. Maybe he had Engels or whatever his name is, looking over his shoulder, correcting his work. So that would be an example of physics, right? How, like the cause or mechanism behind the creation of that document, right? It didn't just, it's not like a dog wrote it or something, right? You know, so that's physics. Now, an example of philosophy would be like, why did Karl Marx write the Communist Manifesto? Like, what were the reasons for doing that? Right? Why did he spend so much time at the library? Doing journalism or whatever it was he was doing. That's philosophy, right? Now Gaede seems to think that I'm really interested in philosophy. I'm not really interested in philosophy. Not in the sense of rational science, and not in the old sense where we talk about ways of thinking, or the deeper questions, right? Pondering the deeper questions of life. So just know I'm not really interested in that. Like philosophy in the Gaedian sense, like that is a part of rational science. That is a part of psychology. Okay, but it's not something I'm really interested in. I'm interested in, what causes this, what causes that, and I'm trying to give a physical interpretation of psychology. Now, again, what is psychology? Psychology is it's just rational science with a narrowed focus on a set of topics, right? It's focused on stuff like oddly satisfying videos, on trauma, on anything related to thoughts and feelings, right? And by thoughts I would say images, basically images that appear in a person or animal's head. Now, I'm not interested in like the Jungian psychobabble. I'm not interested in that Freudian, whatever, where like or whatever it is, like or that reified language you typically find in the work of psychologists, like Sam Vaknin, for example, like where he's talking about how like the true self consumes the false self, right? That's reified language. You got to put some objects in there, and you have the objects move around, not these concepts, right? But psychology is really interesting though, because yes, it is true that they use irrational language. Okay, it is true that they do that. But picking apart what it is that they're actually seeing and putting that in the language of rational science, that is what is interesting, because they are actually seeing something. I do think that they are actually seeing something, but they're not exactly sure how to put it into words. They're not really sure what they're grasping at. And that's something I always found so interesting about irrational explanations, right? How somebody could say something like, that there was a ghost and the ghost went through the wall. How does that feel rational to a person, right? Are they are they seeing something there? And that's sort of how I got interested in psychology. Was I was thinking a lot about like irrational explanations, and why is it that irrational explanations feel so good? Why does it feel so good to say stuff like one-dimensional objects, or infinite mass, infinite density, stuff like that? Because it's all well and dandy to say that they're irrational, but why is it that that person is able to feel so strongly about it? Why are people able to feel so strongly about supernatural phenomena? And And in my mind, or sorry, in the perspective of rational science, we can only imagine an object, right? So there's got to be something on the screen, so to speak, right? Because remember, the way that we think, how we think, it's a physical process. It's ropes torquing. Gaede said something to do with the arrangement of atoms in the brain. Combined with chemical, the movement of chemicals. But what I think is really interesting is, could you take that physical motion? Could you convert that into a format that is understandable to a human? So, for example, could you look at the engrams? An engram is a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical physical change that occurs in the brain. Okay, and this is something that scientists sometimes talk about as the engram. The engram is basically, it's pretty much what Gaede is saying, that there's like these EM ropes. It's some sort of physical change that happens when we encounter phenomena. All right, like when light torques through our eyeballs, right? Creates a physical change in there. Could you take that physical structure, and could you convert that into, say, an MP4, right? A video file? And I think you can. In the same way that I think that you could, take a computer chip, or a disc, right, or a vinyl record. You scratch grooves into a vinyl record, and you can change it into a completely different format, right? In this case, that would be a visual format. Pretty much what that person would be seeing, right, or thinking in their head. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's this divide where I see Gaede just sort of drawing the line at explaining things like in an abbreviated way, right? Where he'll say like say for example, I ask a question like, why are insults hurtful, for example. Gaede will tell you something like, like the EM ropes in the head, in the person's head, and then chemicals, and then that's how you feel sad, right? So it's just like, it's engrams and it's chemicals, it's or nerves, and electric serpentines or whatever, and that's sort of how you that's sort of how insults hurt your feelings. But the problem is that that's an abbreviated explanation. Now, I don't think that abbreviated explanations are necessarily irrational. I'm not entirely sure, but I guess that's one of the first questions I have is an abbreviated explanation irrational? Because I think that whether an explanation is abbreviated or not is just sort of a matter of opinion. Like, say, for example, we go back to the window, right? Why did the window break? And you say that, well, an object did it. Okay, well, all right, well, what kind of object, right? So, is it rational to be vague? Is it rational to not get so detailed, right? Like, for example, like the atom, right, that Gaede draws. It's not a complete drawing of an atom. It's like a simplified atom, right? And like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, I think you understand the mechanism there. So I don't necessarily think that it's irrational to say that an object broke the window, but I guess I want to establish what kind of object, right? I want to get very specific with this. I want to know how this works at a very fine or at a much finer level than what Gaede is used to. So, like, in the case of the insult, I will want to think about what kind of images appear on the screen, right, so to speak, and then how those images are wired to, specific, chemical sets, for example. So getting more detailed with that. But I'm not interested in like mumbo jumbo about archetypes or the ego or anything like that. I'm taking Gaede. I'm taking your foundations of physics, and I'm just like looking at I'm looking at questions of psychology in a more detailed way, I guess. So like I'll look at these compilations of what are called oddly satisfying videos, or these compilations of what are called liminal spaces, right? And in the intro to the video, that's a compilation of liminal spaces, and I'll look at stuff like that, and I will try to imagine the kind of images that appear on the screen, so to speak, right? And it's a very difficult subject matter because we are in our own head, so to speak, and we're kind of confused why we are conscious and not experiencing what other people are experiencing. And I understand that it's kind of irrational to ask those kind of questions, like you've already established that consciousness is what the brain does. Okay, I understand that. And when I ask a question like, well, why is it that I'm conscious in this body? I'm kind of answering my own question. It's just like the brain is doing that. It's just like, these processes are happening. Okay. I hope you can follow along. I'm kind of autistic, so, and not the best at public speaking. I think Gaede is very good at public speaking. So that's basically what I'm doing. And I guess the key question is, should we take those engrams, that those physical changes that are happening in the brain, should we take those and convert them into another format? Can we do that? Is it rational to do so? Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you and have a nice day.
My name is Sam Vaknin, and I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. The narcissist has no private life, no domain reserved exclusively for his nearest and dearest. The narcissist's life is a spectacle, with free access to all, constantly on display. To solicit narcissistic supply, attention, and admiration from his audience, the narcissist flaunts a false self. He pretends to be all-powerful, omnipotent, and all-knowing, omniscient, brilliant, unique, and perfect. Pathological narcissism, as we all know, is a reaction to prolonged abuse and trauma in early childhood or early adolescence at the latest. The source of the abuse of trauma is varied. The perpetrators could be parents, role models, teachers, even peers. Moreover, pampering, smothering, spoiling the child, or engulfing it are also forms of abuse. The narcissist's true self, his inner child if you wish, is obliterated by this barrage of a variety of forms of mistreatment. That the narcissist possesses a prominent false self, as well as a suppressed and dilapidated true self, we all know. It's common knowledge. Yet how intertwined and inseparable are these two? Do they interact? How do they influence each other? What behaviors can be attributed squarely to one or the other? Does the false self assume traits and attributes of the true self in order to deceive the world? We should not forget that the false self is an adaptive reaction to pathological circumstances, but its dynamics make it predominate. The false self devours the psyche and preys upon the true self. Thus, it prevents the efficient and flexible functioning of the personality as a whole. The remnants of the true self are so ossified, so shredded, so repressed, and so cowed into submission that for all practical purposes the true self is dysfunctional and useless and even, to some extent, non-existent. In a full-fledged narcissist, the false self is the one to imitate the true self, and it does so in two ways. First one is reinterpretation. The false self causes the narcissist to reinterpret certain negative emotions and reactions in a flattering, socially acceptable light. For instance, if the narcissist is afraid of someone, he is unlikely to admit it. He will reinterpret his discomfort as empathy and compassion. To be afraid is humiliating and narcissistically injurious. To be compassionate is commendable and earns social approval and respect. The second mechanism is emulation. The narcissist is possessed of an uncanny ability to psychologically penetrate others, to immediately discern their frailties, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. But he abuses this gift. He puts it at the service of his own control freakery and even sadism. The narcissist uses this ability to annihilate the natural defenses of his victims by faking empathy, by imitating emotions and their attendant behaviors, their affect. The narcissist possesses emotional resonance tables. Throughout his life, the narcissist keeps records of every action and reaction that he observes in his human environment, every utterance and its consequence, every datum provided by others regarding their own state of mind and emotional makeup. From these enormous databases, the narcissist constructs a set of formulas which often result in impeccably accurate renditions of emotional behavior. This can be enormously deceiving. Once formed and functioning, the false self stifles the growth of the true self, paralyzes it. Henceforth, the true self is virtually non-existent and plays no role, whether passive or active, in the conscious life of the narcissist. It is difficult to resuscitate the true self, even in psychotherapy. Thus, there is no real conflict between the false self and the true self. First, as I said, the true self is much too weak to do battle with the overbearing false self. The false self is all-pervading. It is adaptive. It helps the narcissist to cope with the world. Without the false self, the narcissist would be subjected to so much pain and hurt that he might disintegrate. This happens to narcissists who go through a life crisis. The false self becomes dysfunctional and inefficient for a while, and the narcissist experiences a harrowing feeling of annulment and disintegration. The false self has thus many functions, but two of them are critical. It serves as a decoy. It attracts the fire. It is a proxy for the true self. It is tough as nails and can absorb any amount of pain, hurt, and negative emotions. By conjuring up the false self, the child develops immunity to the indifference, manipulation, sadism, smothering, or exploitation of others. The false self is a cloak, a mantle, a Harry Potter contraption, protecting the narcissist, rendering him invisible and omnipotent at the same time. Secondly, the false self is misrepresented by the narcissist and presented by him as his true self. The narcissist says in effect, I am not who you think I am. I am someone else. I am this false self. Therefore, because I am omnipotent and omniscient, I deserve a better, painless, more considerate treatment. The false self is therefore the foundation of the narcissist's inane and insane sense of entitlement. It is a contraption intended to alter other people's behavior and attitude towards the narcissist. These roles are crucial to survival and to the proper psychological functioning of the narcissist. The false self is far more important to the narcissist than his dilapidated, dysfunctional, shameful true self.